Thanks everyone for joining us today to our next part in our series, Let's Talk News Business, the conversation series of the Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, where we talk about the present and future of the digital news business, revenue models, strategies, products. I'm super excited that today we have Rafat Ali, CEO of Skift, and Jeff Jarvis is going to lead the conversation with Rafat. So Jeff, take us off.
Thank you, Anita. Anita doesn't plug her program enough, so I will for her. This comes out of the News, Innovation, and Leadership program that Anita runs at the Newmark School, preparing the next generation of the bosses of the industry in our business. And thank you for being here, Rafat. This is for the public, for journalists, but also for those students and those who will be watching on video. So this becomes a documentary moment. Rafat Ali has been a friend of mine for many, many years. He was the founder of paidContent, covering our industry. So it was media wonks like me loved it because it was that good and it was about us. He was also a unique character in our business who went his own way. And I always marveled at his tremendous independence. I was there when there were people trying to throw money at him for paidContent. And he stood back and thought and said no, because he realized he was going to lose control. He was going to lose some ability there. And he went his own way. He sold paidContent to The Guardian, and other things happened after that, which are its own tale, and then started Skift, which is a really wonderful business covering the travel business. And I've quite admired what Rafat has done there and how he also went his own way. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But then came COVID, and I said, not to put too fine a word on it, oh shit, because he has a business that covers the travel industry and depends in great measure on events about the travel industry. So it was a 1-2 punch. And I worried for Skift and for him, but I mean this sincerely. If there is any single entrepreneur on earth who could weather this, who could figure it out, who would find other ways, I believe it is my friend Rafat. And that's not to say that he's through the storm yet, but he's still got his nose above water in the storm. And so I wanted to have this conversation today, Anita and I did, to hear about that, to hear about how you weathered this, when it hit you, when you realized it was going to go crazy, and what you've done about it and what you've learned. So thank you so much for being here from Queens, which you've been a great proponent of as the next hip place. And so tell us, well, first describe Skift so people understand what it does and why it exists, and then tell us about what happened. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for your friendship, and thank you for your support over the years. I think it's almost 18 years now at this point since we first met in Manhattan.
I still had white hair and he had no hair, but yeah.
No. I had a little bit of hair back then. But also I've been very appreciative of CUNY J School since the start. And it's been what, 10 years, maybe more now?
15 almost.
15 years now. And I've been going there to talk to the students, I think, almost for that many years.
You've been a friend of the school from the beginning, yes.
And we've hired interns. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but an intern started Monday at Skift. Corey Matthews started, I don't know if any of you know this, or I don't know if he's on this call, but he started at Skift this Monday for 8 weeks. So we've had a long-standing relationship with CUNY J School. So, so what has life been in the last 4 months at this point? You know, I think I've aged, I don't know, 10 years in that. I lost my hair in my first company. I've become, my beard has gone almost completely white in the last 4 months. It's been existential for us. I think the oh shit moment that you had was certainly very, very bullseye for us. And for us, it was a mix of travel industry. It was a mix of events being 40% of our business, and also it was Q1 for us, which Q1, generally speaking, for us is the lowest cash flow quarter. Small company, mostly bootstrapped. Our revenues accrue and come in mostly in Q2, Q3, and part of Q4. And so we from being in fetal position early on to sort of getting out of that. And, I think we're back in the, I would say, crawling phase at this point. This is true as much for the travel industry as it is for us as a company covering it. We're not a travel company. We are a media company that covers the business of travel, but certainly all of our revenues come from the industry. So we're not out of the woods yet. I think we have figured out a narrow path of survival till the end of the year, and, build from there with the hope that there's no humanly way possible that it can get worse than what it was in March and April. But that we don't know. We can operate if it sort of stays in the May to June type level, which is somewhat better than March and April. That narrow path we can survive on. We, as a much smaller company, we went through the pains that a lot of companies have gone through. The only thing was we were early because being in travel, we first started doing stories in sort of mid-Jan when the first stories started coming out of China. And because Chinese travelers are the biggest global force, have emerged as the biggest global force in travel over the last 10, 15 years, every micro movement of people, of tourists from China is very closely followed by us and everybody else in the travel industry. So as soon as it started hitting, we said, oh, this is going to be bad for the travel industry. Just didn't realize a pandemic and all the stuff that happened since, but we knew it was going to be bad for the travel industry in a China-only context, but that was big enough in itself. So we put a hiring freeze early Feb. We were about 60 plus people then. We were hiring about 6 people, which for us is a lot to be hiring 6 people at one time. And big plans for 2020, our revenues, we were planning on increasing by 40% year 9. This is all organic. A lot of it based on events, new events. So we were launching a bunch of new events, vertical events focused on different parts of the travel industry. We're expanding our Asia event from 1 day to 2 days, etc. And obviously none of that all went out of the window. So from 40% growth in revenue for 2020 to 40% contraction from 2019 to 2020 is what our aim is. That I would consider that a win. Our survival is our win. And one of the things we tried to do as we tried to look at all types of options, and we can come to why I didn't go the funding route. One, there was not people like beating down my door to throw money. That's never been the case with us, and I've been very public about that journey as well. But we went through all kinds of options, obviously cut all expenses that we can. We have since given up our physical office. Our office, well, we still have the office. It's the one in New York. Our lease finishes in the end of July. But that saves us a bunch of money, helped us save multiple jobs in the company. And we initially went with the furlough route, about 1/3 of the company, and then have subsequently, as of 2 weeks ago, let them go because we just couldn't figure out. Obviously, the world isn't back to normal at all. In fact, if you read today's headlines in the New York Times, it looks a little scary because Beijing and China re-emerging, US is where it is, and many other travel industry. Hilton laid off yesterday 20% of their corporate staff, the first time in history that they've done that. And so, May was better. I worry that June, the sentiment, and this is true from I think for many of the sectors, the sentiment is like in a wild swing. One day it's up, one day it's down. Stock market is sort of somewhat indicative of it. But so that's where we are. We're a much smaller company, about 40 people, but the path is narrow. And one of the things I would pride is our team has just been incredible through this, taking all kinds of sacrifices. Even the team that's here now taking sacrifices in terms of pay cuts, et cetera, and one of the things we tried to do is not to cut editorial. by the way, a sentiment. I don't know if you've heard from other media entrepreneurs that understand journalism but are going through similar things. But I've talked to many of the media entrepreneurs, and the sentiment is, let's not cut editorial, because that's the engine that will, especially if you're covering communities or sectors or things that need this coverage. Obviously, entertainment may be for instance, a different type of ball game. So we've done the minimum cuts we could in editorial, the minimum cuts we could in research, and it's just been incredible coverage for the industry when it needed it most.
I want to go there. I want to dig into some of these specifics about your business decisions, but I want to start there. Is the horrible, tragic, amazing paradox of this is that the industry needs Skift now more than ever, yet can afford Skift less, and Skift can afford itself less. So how have you adapted to the need of the industry first before we get to the business decisions about how you got there?
Yeah. So there's a couple of conflicting forces at play here. One is, how do you charge the most amount of money from people? Because like at this point, cash is what we need, versus how do you do the best for the industry that has no ability to pay right now? And so I think we've been able to balance it well. It includes product changes. So we started virtual events quickly in a pay what you want model. And so a lot of people could, so the background story is we were working on a subscription paywall for Skift for the last 6 to 8 months prior to COVID. Jason, my co-founder, is now the chief product officer, but the dev team and design team had been working on it. So it was going to launch in March or April with an idea, a bit like New York Times, 5 articles for free, and after that, paid type subscription. Makes sense. We have our high price subscription services on the research. Obviously, people pay for tickets, thousands of dollars. It just didn't make sense, like 1 million to 1.5 million people coming monthly and not paying anything for it. Obviously, monetized through advertising, but our advertising is not impression based at all. Our advertising is branded content. So the traffic didn't matter at all in the normal sense that other media companies do. So we decided to add a subscription paywall, add the membership model. The tech was built. We built it all in-house. We didn't go with any of the vendors. We're using some third-party tech as a plugin, but where we went. And then we decided not to do that for the reasons that I just mentioned, which is industry can't afford it. It's a crucial thing. So we quickly changed that tech, which was ready, to do pay what you want. So that was one, which is lots of people can get in free, the people who want to support us. And we went with a la Guardian model of our independent journalism is crucial. We are showing it by our work. And so that initially we got a good bump.
So how, like give me some
6
idea.
figures, like we crossed 6 figures in about a month.
Okay.
It's not huge. It doesn't save the company, but it is incremental revenue that we were not getting from any other place. And it also gives us a lot of learning. So we are now phasing out pay what you want and launching our subscription paywall as we had planned before on July 1. So it's going to launch soft launch July 1. Obviously July 4th is coming. So we'll just, put it in the wild and then market it from there. I think, having started paid content 2002, it's now 18 years. It's kind of irony that I'm finally realizing the value of subscription paywalls.
paid content, which was never paid,
which
and
was
not just
paid.
about paid content, but it
Correct.
was the name you have.
Yeah, the name we started with.
Just to be clear, is the pay what you want the same as the contribute?
So there's a pay what you want and there's a contribute generally to Skift. To pay what you want is specific things, webinars, for specific things. Pay what you. We also quickly moved on our research, which is a high price $2,000+ yearly subscription, to a monthly we added a monthly subscription, lower price. People who can't afford to pay that lump sum can do monthly subscription there. So we did that. So a bunch of these types of innovations we did. Obviously, those are product innovations that are that intertwined with the business very, very well. And a few things saved us. we had a very good AR, which is accounts receivable, going into this, meaning we had a banner first quarter until March. Just very, very good.
Wow. Ouch. In a way. Good, but ouch at the same time,
yes.
Right?
So obviously we knew a bunch of that money that is going to drop off because advertisers want to pull out, et cetera, et cetera. I'm surprised, and this is the work of our team, Carolyn Cremens, who's our president, and Pam, who's our head of sales, and sort of her team, all their team, worked really hard to make sure that the drop-off is as minimal as possible or moved into other things or next year, et cetera, et cetera. We've been able to do that quite a bit. I have the best CFO in media business, I would humbly say. Michael Kanefi was my CFO in my previous company, also CFO here. Cash flow management, just really, really tight cash flow management. We did get the PPP loan, so it was, squeezing blood out of a stone, much like as has been for a lot of other people. And so we got the PPP loan that really saved the 40 jobs that we have in the company today. Wow. And I did initially put out some feelers to our existing investors and some new investors about potentially raising some money, but it was going to be nothing but panic at that point. March and April, no good rational decision would have come out of March and April on any type of.
You would have gotten screwed on valuation.
Correct. And even though that doesn't matter beyond a certain point, even if, let's say we raised a small amount, like $1 million, it wouldn't have diluted us too much, but it still wouldn't have been the best decision at that point. So I avoided. Plus, I realized every investor is getting these emails and calls from every portfolio company in the planet that they've ever invested in. And so it just didn't make any sense. And again, as I said, it's not like 20 people were beating down on our doors to invest money in Skift. They weren't doing it the best of times. And travel, in fact, one of the things we learned, so we looked at alternative financing, things like debt financing, et cetera, as well. And this is a true story. We got approved by at least one firm, and then the boss found out that we were in the travel industry, and then he rejected it because he says, we're not touching anything in travel. And so anything that's related to travel is not even getting alternative financing, especially in the small business side like us. And so, from a small business perspective, I think the PPP loan, we fit perfectly in that type of world. So that saved us. And then I think innovations like these contribute model, some of the new sales, that the interesting thing we found out is that even though the travel companies not spending or weren't spending, the larger tech companies that are obviously doing very well, like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Oracle and Adobe and Salesforce, really like the 6 of the top tech companies in the world, are spending, and they're not, even if they're not spending to promote a certain product, they're spending to say, we are here for you industry, because obviously the travel industry spends so much money on their platforms. So they want to be seen as supporting the industry. And so that has been, and I've heard that from other media entrepreneurs in other sectors, that's been true in other business sectors as well. So that helped us quite a bit as well. And now we pivoted all our physical events for the year. So we've reforecasted our revenues twice. And first was physical events in the second half of the year, because we moved all to second. And then we realized, that's not going to happen. It's going to be 0 events. We also have bought 2 companies in the last 2 years. One was Airline Weekly, a subscription newsletter, which airline is so decimated. You would think, like everybody says, subscriptions is the way to go. Mm-hmm. But subscription is the way to go if the people have any ability to pay, right?
Right.
Or if they're not, half of the industry is not on furloughs.
Right.
And so our Airline Weekly is having trouble in the new subscriptions. We've been able to hold to the old subscriptions, but the new subscriptions aren't as great. And it's purely because of just people aren't there. Like, you're emailing people and bounce backs are coming. You can imagine the amount of our bounce backs in our email newsletter went dramatically up, particularly in May, because
they're gone.
They're gone. And so these are the things like where you sort of decipher through running the business, and it just scares the hell out of you.
So By the way, to those who are live as opposed to on tape, throw in questions. I think you're supposed to use the Q&A, and I will mix them in as I go, because I got tons of questions, but I'm sure you'll have fresh ones. All right, so I want to probe in a couple things. One is the events. So the events was how much of your revenue? 40% of your
40% of our revenues and physical events, and we were really leaning into it to become. So we've been doing sort of travel industry wide conferences. So Skift Global Forum in New York that cuts across sectors in travel. We came upon this revelation that we should do more vertical focus conferences, short-term rental, tour operator, family travel, et cetera, et cetera.
You also did regionals.
And regionals.
So you shifted to like
online events, all virtual at this point. Yeah, and what
have you learned about that? How's that working? What works? What doesn't? What do you learn long term about that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that we're learning as all this learning's obviously going along. There are early learnings, and then there are learnings that as we speak today. Early learnings was, wow, we can get 10 times the number of people online.
Right.
Which, you and I are old enough to remember that was the feeling we had in like 1997 when we first started going on the internet. Wow, finally, like after 20 years, 20 plus years, the promise of internet being a global thing is being fulfilled in many ironic ways. But so that was the first thing. Obviously, money wasn't there in terms of tickets or sponsors, but at least the audience was there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The audience that we are seeing and others are seeing is we're all exhausted. Everybody's just tired of joining these online things. And so there is an exhaustion on virtual events I would say we're in the medium, like the short term was March and April, medium term now. I'm bullish though on long term, which is that they will become part of our overall product when physical conferences come back. They will have its own product line. And so the lessons, it's too early to say what people want to pay.
Okay.
Our general sense, and this is just ballpark based on early data, not just from us, but the second company we bought was something called EventMB, which covers the business of events. We bought it last year in September. Incredibly, their business has held up really well. Not because they covered the business of events. They quickly, and Julius, who's the founder of it, the sort of the blogger that turned it into a media company very similar to my previous story, has been very vocal about virtual tech for years. And it was just the right moment, lightning in a bottle. They did a virtual event on how to take your event virtual. It's called Pivot to Virtual in March. That got 10,000 people around the world in this industry of event planners. We got $100,000 in sponsorship from it, from the not Zooms of the world,
right?
And for tech vendors. So we have a lot of, not only do we do events, we cover the business of events. So it's a very meta world because business of events is part of the travel industry. The learnings some of the ballparks that we've figured out. So for a physical conference, if you're getting like $1 million a day, 50% from tickets, 50% from sponsorship, and then your costs are about 50, $500,000. So you're getting like gross margins of about 50%. For $1 million conference, costs about $500,000. That's typically what a physical conference for us in a good year would be. In a virtual scenario, that would drop to 1/3 to 1/4. So anywhere from $250,000 to like $350,000 top line, with half from sponsorship, half from event or from tickets, or that mixture could change. But the costs are a lot lower.
Right.
It's basically software, and software could be, you want Zoom or a bit more fancy. You could be anywhere from for a full day conference would be max maybe $50,000. So your gross margins just went up dramatically. If as the world becomes normal, you're able to sort of scale that to the extent that's possible and make that as a mix with the physical events, I think it'll be a very good business long-term for us.
Do you, odd little tiny question, since you serve the travel industry, will you get in political hot water for having too many virtual events rather than in-person events? Are you modeling a behavior they don't want to see, or have they realized?
Interesting question. Yeah. Look, we've been covering not just events, but the world of business travel as well. Business travel intersects with events. I mean, a lot of business travel is events. There's some indication that business travel may not ever come back to the levels that it was pre-COVID, because people are now used to this, what you and I are doing. Events may not, the large event companies that do these conventions on acres and acres of land may not ever come back to the levels that they are. Our role continues to be as independent as humanly possible, which is we will cover whatever the industry does. And, there's a chance that our events may not ever, the physical events may not ever make that money that we did in the past. Are we ready for it? Of course. I mean, like, how else will we survive? I mean, the whole point is to figure out, to be flexible to whatever the demands of the industry are long-term. And if it means smaller events, if it means more virtual events, that's what we'll adjust to.
So over the years, I've known people who work for you who admire you as a boss and a leader. Talk to me about the trauma you've had as a leader through this, the lessons you've learned, advice you have, holding on to your culture, having to deal with the tough decisions. Just
yeah. It's, look, I've gone through. Everybody says, "Oh, we've gone through these," but it never prepares you, right? It just never does. I'll become a little personal. I lost my dad in December. I was in India. I was there. And part of being a Muslim is that you wash your father's body, and the daughter washes the mother's body as part of the cleaning ritual and as part of the burial. The only way you can do this as a human is you basically turn off your brain. And there's a priest there that tells you, do this, do that, cut this cloth, put it this way. It was obviously not that, like it's not, but it was a version of that, which is 2 months later, you basically shut off your brain, like your emotional brain. And you just have to follow instructions that your sort of rational brain is giving you, along with obviously your, the 5 or 6 management team that is focused on this. And so you just shut off your emotional brain and focus on your rational brain. And, the decisions are so tough, because it's like, oh, this person has worked with me for 6 years. Like, how do you put them on the sidelines? But this will save me this much money. But then how do I say that you've been loyal to me for 6 years, and I'm going to put you on the sidelines or going to lay you off? And so those are just incredibly hard decisions that again, the rational brain says, save the company, save the company, save the company. So yes, to let go of 20-ish people, but we're also able to save 40 plus jobs. And so that's the positive that I take out of it. It also, I am genuinely excited about a virtual remote company, and we've been resetting our culture based around a remote company. Obviously, it's just the start of it. On people, in fact, many people in our company have begun to move out of New York. One person, our head of research, Aisha Wang, she just moved. She has 2 young kids. She just moved to Denver Sunday. So it's beginning to happen. I don't think a lot of people will leave New York, but a certain subset of people, especially the young or people with young families. And so the resetting of culture is happening in our company, which is ironic, obviously, in travel. But I think the physical gatherings that we had been doing, either the company annual retreat that we've been doing for the last 5 years for people, or we bring everybody to, so there were 2 times when everybody in the company met in the year. Those 2 times now become even more important for us. And so, the mental toll has been high. And the thing is, you can't show it beyond a certain point to your team. is what it is. You can't show them the bank account and say, these are the cash left, because that would just cause panic. But you have to be transparent about the intent. So one of the ways I've sort of figured it out is you want to be transparent about the intent, but you don't want to be so transparent that you cause panic. And so it's a balance of that. And I think we've been able to do that. And I think we're in a much better place today. But again, if you ask me today, I'm a little scared about the headlines this morning.
Yep. Same here. And personally, as the leader, you have to give sympathy and probably get none.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, honestly, how does it matter? If the company survives, I will get, it really doesn't matter in the scheme of things. Who cares? Our team has been incredible. I've gotten all kinds of support and vice versa from our team. They know the pain that I and my co-founder and others have gone through in the last 3 to 4 months. And I think we come out as better human beings, each of us individually, and also as a better company. And so that's all that matters. And as long as the company survives and the work that we're doing survives,
I hear you.
Everything else is secondary.
So switching the culture too, from an in-office culture where you had a culture of the office, and you mentioned that, the travel stuff, to the virtual office. Any lessons there for you're now permanently virtual, right?
No, we're permanently virtual.
Yeah.
From here on. Yeah, we're going permanently. One of the things we've done is to not call ourselves remote or virtual. So these are, I'm a big fan of like words matter. And even though they may sound gimmick, it does really hold, it changes people's thinking long-term. So the couple of terms we're using, we're a connected company. Sounds a little too frou-frou, but I do like it. Distributed company, I think fits more. We're a distributed company. And so remote is probably the worst term on that front. Because like, who's remote? We're all now everywhere.
You are where you are, right?
We are where we are. So remote doesn't matter. So I think that language matters, intentionality matters. And we're still early, very, very early in figuring out. I've been reading a lot. I've been talking to a lot of people. I've been listening to podcasts, as I'm sure all of us are, on virtual companies and how to change your culture. Ironically, paidContent started in my bedroom. I mean, you know the story.
Right.
And so I was my first
Stacy, who was
in St. Louis, yeah.
Was in St. Louis the whole time.
Yeah.
Right.
And this was pre-Skype. Like, we started pre-Skype. Forget like it was audio, and it was Nokia N95. This was pre-Nokia N95 phones.
Right.
Forget iPhone. And so I'm used to working from home. It's just that I had not used that muscle in 10 years, maybe more. And so personally, that's been, I'm beginning to sort of relearn that muscle. And I think, the cliche is communication matters. The communication matters, like over communication matters. And I think, it has to be systematized. Like, startups typically thrive on chaos. Virtual companies don't thrive on chaos.
Right.
So you have to have systems in place for everything. And the energy transfer that happens in a physical environment is not going to happen in, obviously, virtual environments in any possible way. And so I think we're at the early stages of setting up those systems, whether how to do evaluation of, managers doing evaluation of their teams, and all of these things exist. It's a matter of us bringing in and adopting them, right? We have an incredible head of HR, Linda, who was the head of HR for Martin Niesenholt, who you know very well. She was the head of HR for the New York Times Digital, was head of HR for Reader's Digest, head of HR for Consumers Union, so extremely, extremely experienced. And so, so we're early stages. We have a culture guide. We're redoing our culture guide completely as a result of us becoming a remote and a distributed company. And when we're able to hire again, I'm guessing sometime in 2021, hopefully, I want to hire from the world. Like we're in travel. Like how can we not be hiring? We were a pretty global company for a small company, but now I'm able to hire anywhere in the world. The only barrier is time zones. It's not anything else anymore. It's like, can this person work with that person in that time, with that time zone difference? But there's no other consideration today. No other consideration.
Dina asks in the questions, what lessons you learned from paid content that proved useful in this crisis?
In this crisis, I think I went through as you remember, paid content was started after 9/11. So it was not the best of times for media at that time. You were part of it. We both of you and I discovered blogging then, or sort of our voice through blogging then.
Yes.
And so sort of that scrappiness of like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I'm left with a blog that I have to write about the travel industry. Well, guess what? I did that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have, like, if that's what it comes down to, I'm happy to do that. It would suck to be in that position, but I'm happy to do that. I think putting yourself out there, I did it, this is pre-social media, through the blog, like people knew where I was and et cetera, if you remember those days. We have not hit our pain as a company at Skift. I've talked about it publicly. I'm talking about it publicly now. We are asking for people to contribute. There was some trepidation, and internally when we launched our contribution model, people saying, "Oh, what if they think like Skift is desperate?" So what?
Rationality would tell you it's tough times for Skift.
Yeah, and fine. People will think that for like one day. Next day they'll go about their lives. Who cares? And so this too shall pass is the oldest adage, and it just continues to you continue to relearn this too shall pass.
So you, as I remember, after you left paid content, you went on, and I'm envious, a magnificent set of round the world trips, which gave you the passion on travel. I think was part of your research that led to Skift, or inspiration that led to Skift.
Correct.
How was it for you personally? I had this discussion on Twitter just yesterday. One person said, it was Anita, who said, "I really miss travel." And
yeah, we all do.
And I said, "I worry about you saying that, Anita, because I want to make sure she stays in New York." And so then Vivian Schiller, our mutual friend, said, "I kind of don't. That worries me." And,
Vivian and I used to say that.
Exactly. And we identified ourselves in great measure by our status, Meal United Global Services, I might add.
Yeah.
So we defined ourselves in great measure on travel. You defined yourself on travel.
Right.
What's your personal attitude toward travel now, and as part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a personal mix with business because it's hard for me to separate both of them. We were headed into a backlash against what we call big travel going into this, over tourism, climate change, all that stuff. That was happening. It was early stages of what big tech became, like the backlash against big tech. And it could have been travel in 2 years. It could have been. And so a reset was needed. Nobody wanted this type of reset, but a reset was needed. And so personally, like travel, for us to travel to exotic places and like for bragging rights, I'm glad that's gone. Travel for me is at this point going to Jacob Riis Park, which is half an hour away from where I am with my son, to the beach. The most joyful, 2 hours of my life in the last few months. That's travel. And so I think us rediscovering our local neighborhoods, like we're now intensely aware of like the 10-block radius around where we live. This is particularly true in anonymous cities like New York City.
Right.
If that's the good that comes out of it, if that's the silver lining that comes, like we know how to support small businesses. We know how to support people who put their whole lives at stake for what they do. I think, in many ways, that's the silver lining I'm taking out of it. Of course, I miss travel. Like my son keeps talking about Puerto Rico. We have this secret Airbnb that we really like that we want to go to, and he keeps asking about this Airbnb on the mountain. Obviously, I want to go visit my mom. I was going to go end of March in India, and that hasn't happened. So, I miss London. London is my second home after New York. We have a team there, and so we miss that. But I'm not in any hurry. People have said, you write about the travel industry, you write about all the safety precautions, all the stuff that our team is doing. Do you feel confident today, based on what your team has been writing, that would you go out on a flight today?
And your answer?
No. So
what will it take? Just lower rates of transmission?
Yeah.
Externalities.
I just think that the confusion in guidelines, which is reflective of the political leadership of the world, not just business leadership, is too much of a confusion to risk this at this point. Like, I'm dying to go to London to meet my friends. Obviously dying to go to India to meet. India's closed. London at least is. You can go to UK and you'll be quarantined for 14 days in your house. Nobody's going to check up because they're completely incompetent.
Yes.
But at least you'll be in London. But I can't say with any certainty that is safe, certainly not with family.
So one of the things that hurt at the beginning of this was the cancellation of the International Journalism Festival in Perugia, which is one of my favorite events a year, where Vivian Schiller, to mention her again, gathers great dinners with great pasta. And I miss all my friends. And since you've covered media and technology as well as travel, and you have events, I'm curious that the information piece of this, the media piece of the events you've figured out how to recreate. Obviously, what no one has yet figured out how to create is the hallway, the running into people. And that's true for conferences and conventions. It's also true for offices.
Yeah.
I miss the colleagues I run into the office. Do you have any ideas about how to
recreate that?
Yeah.
So remember, this because you're a media person, and many people I've talked to don't remember this. Maybe it was 2016, maybe it was the last election cycle, where CNN brought a hologram in one of the election coverage and was completely massacred for it because it was a total complete gimmick. There's one of the anchors coming as a hologram into the studio. Well, come 2020, why should that not be a mass technology? And so I just think, and this is what I'm excited about, the events and the in-office experience. I think we're at the cusp, like AR, VR, all the hype cycles we've gone through, right?
Yep.
And we're at the trough of the hype cycle. I think that's the word. I think we think Zoom is the apex of virtual tech. It's the start of it. And I think in 5 years, we'll have a completely new language of interaction that we can't even imagine today. I think, much like, for instance, Snapchat. Snapchat was a language that didn't exist, because Snapchat is not tech, it's a language, right? It's a way on people interacting. Didn't exist whenever Snapchat, 7 years ago. What would be the equivalent that comes out of this world that changes the language of human interaction in 5 years from now? So in many ways, I'm still betting on tech, even though a lot of people are down on tech, to solve, or at least create the possibilities of this interaction that in a best use case, I'm sure there'll be tons of worse use cases, but in the best use case will enhance the virtual thing beyond us just sitting like this.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the tech. I agree with you, and I think there are opportunities there. The other thing is our norms and how we communicate, right? What's the, we all now have sending the invite to each other.
Correct.
We're developing new norms and standards about what's okay in terms of taking somebody's time and getting them on a call or not.
Yeah.
How do you volunteer someone or be volunteered with them to communicate when maybe you don't want to or you're too busy? It's going to require a whole new delicate dance.
I think we'll learn as humanity. 3 years ago, I wouldn't expect to be calling my mom every day on video. Now, that is very normal because of FaceTime, et cetera, et cetera. That's just a very basic example. We did our class reunion. My undergrad in India last week. after 24 years, and it was all on Zoom. And we're actually continuing, there are 40 of us, and we're continuing this weekend as well, because it just went on too long. And, those are the norms that we will develop, I think.
So one more question. Sebastian, one of our graduates, I'm proud to say, asks about, I'm going to broaden this question. He asks about you going international, even more so when you're hiring from anywhere, what that means for languages. But the larger question I want to ask, and he being native Spanish speaking, asks about Spanish. I think that may be a hint. But I also want to ask about, because I know you, even through all of this, even through your goal being to make the company survive, you're ambitious, you're optimistic, you're a philosopher king of this world. So I know that you had expansion plans. You probably have revised those expansion plans for someday in the future when we get back to a new abnormal. What in your dreams, now that you've gone through the beginning of the nightmare, what do you see for growth in the future? Can you see that yet, or is that just impossible?
We've always aimed for impact over growth. That's been a line that I've used forever. Part of me believed in it, part of me didn't. Which is like, you still have to grow fast because it just comes in the DNA of a certain type of companies that you build in a digital age. Just is. Even if you 100% believe in the impact part, you also 100% believe, or at least in a huge part believe on growth part. I'm now 1000% in the impact camp, and I've sort of rediscovered the value of small business as a term, as a quote unquote term that encompasses so much more than startup can ever portray. The word startup can ever portray. And so, we were going to hit $25 million in 2 years. Doesn't matter anymore. And can we have the impact on the industry that helps us grow a profitable company? And we've been sort of skirting. We were some years are profitable, some years break even. Obviously, with this, all the changes that have happened, it gives us once in a lifetime chance to reset our cost base. Shame on us shame on, I shouldn't say all of media, because a lot of media is going through so much pain, but the media has learned to survive on a different cost base right now. And out of it, when there is growth on the other end for different types of companies, not for all, it gives us a better chance to survive. I really believe it gives us a better chance, not just us, but the industry, a better chance of survival, because we've learned to be scrappy and the muscle has been created and sort of honed in this time. And so I think that is what I'm taking away from this. I forget what your original question was.
No, I think that's right. And I think it's not just the survival of things that exist, but it's also, I've been saying that our media house was on fire. Some will burn to the ground. New sprouts will rise, and they're going to rise being small. And so learning how to do small, not valuing scale at every turn, is critical.
Yeah, I have an unwritten post with the headline in our Skift WordPress, but the headline is "The future of travel is small." And this is not just media. I'm talking I think if we can reinvent small and its meaning and its impact on the world, and for all the reasons that we've talked about, including climate change, including, local impact of companies and media companies, you've been talking about local for your whole life. And I think that is small, and small with big impact in the communities that matter. I think if there's a way to sort of bottle this for now and take that as the way to build a better world.
Well, my friend, I value your friendship. I value your leadership and your intelligence and your independence, and most of all, your generosity. This has been, you've opened up in ways that a lot of people going through this kind of crisis wouldn't do. They'd hunker down, but you typically for yourself are very generous, and I want to thank you for that generosity.
Thank you.
Because I think it's valuable to many. Next week, Anita is going to be talking about the future of the news agency with Jane Barrett, the global editor of media news strategy for Reuters, and with Nidal Salah Eldin from the German press agency DPA. So I encourage you to come back for that. I thank you for watching this live and in video. And again, Rafat, good luck and thank you. Cheers.